In this post item component, or in this file, we again create our component function, and as always, export that, of course. And then we define the structure, the markup of a single post item. And for me, a post item will be a list item, which should make sense because we're in an unordered list. So having a list item is a good choice typically. And then the entire item should be clickable. Therefore, I'll import link from next link, because of course I want to use this link to still stay in the single page application, use prefetching and all those things. And I'll then add a link here with an anchor tag inside, since I'll have a more complex HTML structure in that link. And as mentioned a couple of minutes ago, you then need to bring your own anchor tag to tell link that it should still render a anchor tag. And then regarding that more complex structure in here, I want to have a div which will hold a post image, which is at the top of this post card. And below that, another div which will hold the content, the title, the date, and a short excerpt which we want to show. Now inside that first div, I therefore output my image, and we will soon add the source and everything else. And in the second div here, there I'll add a h3 tag with the title of the post, then a time element which outputs the time, something like July 13th, 2022, something like that will be output here, and then a paragraph with the excerpt text of that post. And of course, at the moment, it's just dummy data. Soon it will be actual data. Now, before we continue on the data, let's continue with the styling actually. For this, I will again import classes from that post-item.module CSS file, which I provided to you in the last lecture. And then we add a class to the list item, the post class. We also add a class to the div which wraps the image. It's the image class. And we add a class to this div which wraps the content. It's the content class. Now let's work on the data. The data for a single post item, of course, is not hard-coded in the post item. We will also not fetch it from inside the post item with useEffect and fetch or anything like that. Instead, I expect that I get it through props. So that in the posts grid component, where we render the post items and where we have a list of posts, which probably is a list of JavaScript objects with the post data, where we then just forward that data we have here already into the post item through props. That's the goal. So in post item, we can expect a couple of props. And I will use object destructuring to pull those properties into separate constants. Now it is your component. It is up to you how you expect to get data, how you expect to pass data to this component. If you want to have one prop which carries the entire post data or multiple props. And I will go for one prop here, a post prop on props, and I'll destructure that. So I expect that I get a post prop, and that post prop holds a JavaScript object with multiple properties which describe the post, and I'm now pulling out those properties into separate constants with object destructuring here. And we could, for example, expect a title, an image, an excerpt, which is a short summary text basically for the post, the date, and also the slug of that post. So the path to that post, so to say, the unique identifier of the post. And that's the data with which we can work down there. For example, for the title, we can now output the title, which we extract here. Now for the date, we can also output this, but I want to format it first, make it more human readable. Because the date which we get here as a prop will be in a more machine readable format. Also human readable, but not nicely formatted. And I want to make sure that it is nicely formatted, hence here I will actually create a formatted date constant where I create a new date object and pass my date prop to it so that a new date JavaScript object is constructed based on that date value which I receive here. And hence, of course, we have to make sure that date holds a value which can be used with this constructor function. And we will make sure that this is the case. And then on that date object, we can call toLocale date string and pass enus as a first argument and a configuration object as a second argument to output a human readable date. And here I'll set day to numeric. I'll set month to long so that if it's January, we don't output 0, 1 or just 1, but instead January as a text. And then year to numeric as well. Okay, so now we got that formatted date, and it's now this formatted date which I want to use down here. So here we output the formatted date. Now for the exert, we want to output the, exert, which we're getting as a prop. So output exert here, this exert. And now for the image. The image needs a source property. It needs an alt text. And then we need to specify the width and the height. Now let's start with alt. The alt text could just be our title here. So I'll just use title. Now for width and height, I also prepared some values which should work. And that's 300 and 200 pixels roughly. That should produce good looking images. We will also sometimes have images which are a bit wider than 300 because here the image will actually scale in size as defined in CSS. The CSS code is such that the image will differ in size, but still will always produce good looking images with these settings. And it always will be a bit of tweaking and trial and error to find good settings here to get images which are as small as possible and still look good. But I'll come back to the image later because we will also need to add the layout property here later. But for the moment, let's keep it like this so that we then also see why we will need to add it. For the moment, let's focus on the source instead. What is the source? Well, we get an image here, but the image which we get will actually just be the image file name. So we need to construct a full image path first, because the file name is not enough. And I'll do this with a template literal, so with backticks. And we will start with a hard-coded string of /images/posts. Now that's important. At the moment, in the public images folder, we have no posts folder. I'll change this now and I'll add one. This folder is empty right now, but it will very soon contain some images. So it's this folder which will hold images for individual posts. And that's therefore the start of this image path. Then I want to have a subfolder in that posts folder for every post which we add. And that subfolder should have the unique identifier of that post as a name. So that's slug. Hence, the next segment here is the slug. We'll dive into a subfolder of that slug. So with that slug as a name in that images posts folder. And then in there, we look for the actual image file like this. That's my image path. And therefore now that is what I'll set here as a source. Okay, so that is now this post item component here. For image to work, we, however, still need to import this image component from next image. But now we got this set up. Now we can connect this to our posts grid and then start adding some dummy data so that we do see some output.